talk to you a little bit about the Purple Patch methodology, specifically the endurance training component. How do we help you develop a season of performance? I think the first important characteristic that you have to think about is if you are looking for the maximal adaptations that can facilitate improvements and allow you to be prepared for your races, it's critical that you adopt an athletic mindset. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing is a lot of people, even down to fitness enthusiasts, get lured into thinking about training as being exercising. Exercising is random. When we think about training, training is specific and structured progressive work to deliver you to a goal. So even if you're not specifically racing or targeting an event, it's still great to facilitate improvements to adopt a training mindset because ultimately real results only emerge from specific and consistent training elements. Let's explore how we might develop a calendar year for you as we go through the different phases. The first thing that's really important is to realize that every athlete needs to have a roadmap because that's the only way that you can plan the progression of the training and help you progress throughout the course of the season, as well as actually arrive to the races prepared. Ultimately, what we look for as an athlete is to take a longer term lens where we want to facilitate training that can help develop you physiologically. And then in part two, start to prepare you for your specific demands of your events. If you're not racing, we just want to continue to progress. But we realize that the years actually link together so that, yes, you develop and you improve over the year. But whatever you've done this year, it layers on to next year and it continues on that cycle so that you don't plateau and become an athlete, but you continue to progressively become a better and better athlete as you continue on your endurance journey. So our season is typically structured into four main phases, and that's what we're going to break down for you today. The first phase of training that we typically talk about is we label post-season. A lot of people might call that off-season, but for me, post-season is the critical layering of the foundation of success. In fact, if there is one part of the season that is the common thread that our most successful athletes always embrace, it is this part. And yet, it is the part of training which is the lowest physical stress and has the most flexibility in what you're actually doing during the training. It doesn't mean it's not improvement. So what is postseason? It's really a period of training at the end of one season and the start of the next. You've had a season break and now you move into a period of preparation. What do I mean by preparation? Well, the focus of the training is to develop some foundational fitness and musculoskeletal integrity to get you ready to absorb the heavy training that's going to be coming up in subsequent phases. With that in mind, we have training that is lower stress, but is stressing the tendons, muscles, ligaments, and cardiovascular system so that you can very gently and progressively start to improve integrity so it's ready to absorb hard work. Is that all the only component of postseason? Absolutely not. This opens up the door of opportunity to develop and work on skills and technique, and we can actually think about transitioning through other elements. A great time to do equipment changes, shift up your bike position, or other factors like that. Overall, there's a lower physical load, and that means if we're less focused on the endurance stress, it also opens up the gateway to have a greater emphasis to start to establish the great habit of strength and conditioning. And so that bubbles up an importance in this phase of the year. The nice thing about postseason, typically it's the time of the holidays. People have a lot of travel around this time for most of our athletes that are doing postseason, but we give them a wide berth of flexibility. There is a chance to go and have fun activities such as mountain biking, road biking, even cross-country skiing and hiking. It doesn't all have to be obsessive at this time, but the work that you do in postseason is going to lay the critical musculoskeletal and cardiovascular foundation for the success of the upcoming months. The second phase of training in your progression is typically going to be called pre-season. Now, I care so much about athlete development and physiological development, and yet so many athletes make the mistake of just training for the demands of their events year round. They get specifically trained for their events, but season on season, they never actually develop and continue to improve. Pre-season for me is the first time that you're going to layer on really strong hard work. And yet it is a time that we're still far enough removed from the event specific training that we have to do to be prepared for the actual races, that we actually have a wide berth to actually do some training that's a little bit different. We call this building block work. When you transition from postseason to preseason, you need to be ready for the first fatigue inducing challenging sessions that you're going to do. There's a heavy emphasis on developing cardiovascular fitness, muscular resilience, and doing some training that's a little bit removed from event specific. And typically for multi-sport athlete and endurance athletes, that means high intensity. You're going to be doing a lot of strength endurance work, as we like to call it, which is low cadence on the bike, hill-based running, and even some very, very high intensity maximal effort type sprinting. We're also going to start to try and establish good habits. And so we're going to be thinking about doing that work with great posture on the run, perfect posture on the bike, and ensuring that we're making every swimming stroke effective. Most of your swimming will be short interval based as we look to establish good form and consistency throughout all of the sessions that we do. This is going to be much less specific training, but it is going to be challenging. And in order for this to be effective, you really have to have done postseason first to get the body to be prepared to actually absorb the work and adapt to it. Otherwise, we'll be chasing our tails, and that's where injury risk occurs. That's the first component. If we bring these two phases of training together, postseason and preseason, these are the elements of your seasonal progression where we can actually say, this is where we are going to develop you physiologically and help you advance as an athlete. After this, we go into the back half of the season where we're training for the specific demands of your key events. Once we've finished the part of the year when we've talked about athlete development, now we need to actually train you for the specific demands of the races that you're getting ready for. So the last two phases of the year are event and race specific. They're really co-joined to become one phase, but they have a slightly different personality in the specific focus of the actual training. So we start now to transition to real world training. Who are you as an athlete? What races or events are you getting ready for? And what are the demands of those races? So much of the key sessions are going to be focused in this phase of the year, just under, at, and above the specific event distance and specificity of intensity that you're going to be racing at. It's important to realize that it is still interval driven. So even though you're going to be doing race rehearsal type training, we still break it up into intervals. And typically, most of the key sessions are going to retain some of the elements of the building block work, strength endurance, hill-based running, but we're going to weave that into the personality to make it a little bit more race specific. There's a real emphasis now on getting practice right. And what I mean by that is we start to utilize the actual equipment that you'll be using on race day. We start to think about your habits around fueling and hydration. And we want to test and evolve those so that you arrive at races really ready to go, knowing what your practice and habits are around everything, not just training, but actually the supporting elements such as fueling and hydration so that you can have success on the day. The race-specific sessions are the same as this, but we try and simulate the specific features of the course. Are you going to race in a flat terrain? Okay, great. Your intervals are going to be around flat surfaces. Are you going through a hilly, hard course? Well, let's try and go and simulate that and do some of the specific race-specific intervals on courses like that. If possible, we seek out some of the same environment. Are you racing in hot and humid? Are you going to altitude? And as much as we can, as around the scope of where you live and what your natural environment is, we try and get to that type of training. In other words, it's more of a simulator. You want to think about this as the dress rehearsal night before the main opening night of your racing season. So race specific is course specific, intensity is specific, and the dress rehearsal to get you ready. That's great. That will lead you to results. But when you finish your races and you've had a season of success, it's important to take a break and then rinse and repeat. We go right back to postseason, training stress that drops down, but we have a chance to have a focus on specificity, a rebuilding of the platform so that the season after that can be even better than this one that's in front of us. That is the Purple Patch methodology and mindset, and that's how you however good you are, whatever your level is, whatever your goals are, build a season of performance. Cheers.